On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 161. More details released about Hamas's response to negotiators. Among others, in the first phase of the deal, the group is demanding the release of 250 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 5 female IDF soldiers. In addition, in the second phase of the deal, a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a ceasefire. Israel is reportedly going to send a negotiating team to Qatar to continue negotiations. Local reports in the Gaza Strip state that the IDF is beginning its withdrawal from Hamid City in Khan Yunis. The first humanitarian aid ship arrives at the shores of the Gaza Strip, carrying 115 tons of food and humanitarian aid. Hamas rejected the appointment of Mohammed Mustafa as the new Palestinian Prime Minister, raising doubts about the unity government that is supposed to be established. Israel's defense minister calls on Israel to develop a day-after plan in the Gaza Strip, stating that those who are paying the price for the politicians' delay are the IDF soldiers. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of March 15th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 16th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, more details were published today about Hamas's response to the negotiators. According to reports, Hamas presented a 2-phase deal, including a 6-week truce in each phase. The first phase will involve the release of all female hostages, including female IDF soldiers, also people who are sick, children, and elderly. In exchange for the 5 female IDF soldiers, Hamas is demanding the release of 250 Palestinian prisoners, of which 150 are considered quote-unquote heavy prisoners, either sentenced to life in prison or extended jail time. In addition, Hamas is demanding the complete freedom of movement of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and IDF redeployment along the main corridors of Ar-Rashid and Salahuddin Road. Hamas is also demanding the release of another 600 to 800 Palestinian prisoners for the other hostages in the first phase of the deal. During the first phase, Hamas is stating that the negotiations will proceed about the second phase, which Hamas states will only include the release of more hostages if there is a complete ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and the release of more Palestinian prisoners. Bassem Naim, who is a member of Hamas's political bureau, stated to Al Jazeera today that Hamas is now waiting for responses to its proposals, adding that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in crisis and looking to foil the deal for his own personal political reasons. Responding to all this, despite grave disappointment that was reported in Israel from Hamas's position, a delegation from Israel is expected to be sent to Qatar to begin negotiations in the coming days. Israel's war cabinet is due to meet in order to discuss the parameters for the delegation, i.e., what is it permitted to offer in these negotiations. There is some expectation that Israel is going to be more flexible about freedom of movement of Palestinians back up to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as part of Israel's interest to evacuate civilians from the areas of Rafah. Meanwhile, the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby expressed cautious optimism today after Hamas's response, stating that Hamas's answer is within the parameters of the negotiations. The United States, however, is not going to participate in the current round of negotiations in Qatar. What is expected to happen next is that Israel is going to send this delegation to Qatar, then the sides are going to begin negotiating. Likely we will hear in the coming days if there is any breakthrough reached and the sides coming closer together, i.e. each one willing to climb down from their initial positions, or if negotiations are again going to break down, as both Israel and Hamas say that they are not going to budge from their opening stance. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was a barrage of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip targeting the southern parts of Israel today. These targeted primarily the areas of Sderot, Evim, and Nir Am. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported attacking the launching site from which rockets were fired at Sderot within minutes of the launch, stating that it was attacked with artillery fire and airstrikes as well. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported targeting a Hamas unit as it was trying to transport explosives in the region. The Al-Qassam brigades confirmed this attack as well. In addition, the Al-Qassam brigades reported intensive fighting in the Azahara region of the central camps, claiming that 4 IDF soldiers were killed as Yasin 105 missiles were fired at different IDF tanks. The IDF did not confirm the report that 4 soldiers were killed, however it did report there was intensive fighting in the central camps. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in Khan Yunis, Palestinian sources are reporting that the IDF is beginning its evacuation from the Hamid City region after several weeks of intensive fighting. Alongside this report, however, in the last 24 hours there was still a lot of gun battles and fighting that was reported in the area. Al-Qassam stated that it managed to hit an Israeli tank with a barrage of Yasin 105 missiles, and the IDF reported uncovering a 200-meter tunnel in Hamid City in the middle of a pepper grove. Substantial weaponry was reportedly found in this tunnel, and after excavating it and finding all these explosive devices and RPGs, the IDF reported that the tunnel was destroyed. In addition, pictures of the devastation are beginning to emerge from Hamid City. As the IDF withdraws, more Palestinians are coming out of the different hiding areas, and these pictures are starting to be circulated about what has happened there in the last several weeks. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu gave an interview to John Spencer today, again stating that the world pressuring Israel to not invade Rafah is tantamount to saying that Israel should lose the war, as well as to telling the Allies to only destroy a portion of the Nazi forces and let them rebuild themselves. He stated that Israel is going to invade Rafah in order to, quote, finish the job. In addition to this, in Israel was reported today that the Prime Minister approved operational plans for the Rafah invasion. This came under some criticism in Israel's cabinet meeting, with ministers stating that Netanyahu has been approving plans for the Rafah invasion for over a month, and questioning why the invasion of Rafah is not taking place, since Prime Minister Netanyahu is constantly saying that the invasion is going to take place regardless of the international pressure, and that he is withstanding international pressure. Today, a lot of ministers questioned if the operational plans are ready and approved, why are they not taking place? Responding to Netanyahu's approval plans today, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken again said that the United States needs to see a clear and viable plan for the protection of civilians in Rafah, and that the United States has yet to be presented with this plan. Other news, responding to reports yesterday that the IDF fired upon Palestinians waiting for an aid convoy in the Kuwait square of Gaza City, the IDF stated today that from the results of a preliminary investigation, the IDF did not fire in the vicinity of the aid convoy, and in turn Hamas armed units fired adjacent to the crowd, hours prior to the arrival of aid trucks, and also during the arrival as Palestinians tried to loot the trucks. The IDF is continuing to investigate, according to the report. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 21 Palestinians were killed in this attack. Other sources in the Gaza Strip say the number is quite a bit higher, that it is in fact 40 Palestinians who were killed. Other news, the Israeli Shabak reported to the Israeli cabinet today that there are growing indications that Marwan Issa was in fact successfully assassinated in the attempted assassination that was reported in the Al-Nusrat refugee camp last week. If this is the case, this is the most high-profile assassination that was carried out successfully in the Gaza Strip since the war began, and would constitute a big blow to the military capabilities of Al-Qassam. Marwan Issa is Mohammed Def's deputy, number 3 in the chain of command of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and this would be a very high-profile attack, but would also damage the organization in terms of its ability to communicate between the different units. Other news, a UN report put out today estimates that nearly 23 million tons of debris have accumulated in the Gaza Strip as a result of the devastation of the war. In addition, the report cites scores of unexploded munitions and explosives, stating that between that and the 23 million tons of debris, it is going to take years to clear the Gaza Strip and make it habitable again. Regarding casualties, there's continued confusion in the official numbers that are being reported by the IDF. After yesterday I stated that one more IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip because the official number had gone up to 250 IDF soldiers killed since the invasion began. Today the official number that was reported again was lowered and stands on 249 IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,476. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 149 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 31,490. 73,439 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The Spanish ship Open Arms arrived at the shores of Gaza. This is the first ship to arrive at the shores since the IDF imposed the maritime siege on the Gaza Strip nearly 16 years ago. The IDF reported that 115 tons of food and water and humanitarian supplies were loaded onto 12 trucks of the World Central Kitchen, and these are going to be distributed throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Aid was reportedly already seen being loaded in the Sheikh Hajalin area in Gaza City. This operation was done under IDF security after the aid, which itself I'll say was funded by the United Arab Emirates, was inspected by the IDF in Cyprus. In addition to this, as more preparation is being done for the development of the maritime corridor and the distribution of aid, NBC reported today that Israel is considering hiring private international security companies in order to oversee the security of aid distribution in Gaza, hoping to also entice other countries to pay for this and to allow the IDF to not be in charge of this operation. The report adds that Israel approached the Biden administration with this. However, there's a lot of hesitancy in the Biden administration to have U.S. forces in the Gaza Strip, whether these are military or private security companies. In addition to this, satellite images were published today showing the work on the ports in the Gaza Strip already in preparation for establishing this pier. Other news related to the humanitarian situation. The World Health Organization reported that a convoy delivered a shipment of medical aid and food supplies to the Al-Aqsa hospital in Deir al-Balah today in the central part of the Gaza Strip, sufficient for some 80,000 people. In addition to this, Australia announced today that it is restoring its funding for UNRWA, and this it joins Canada, Sweden, and the EU, who have all restored their UNRWA funding after it was suspended. Australia announced that in addition to this $4 million, it is also transferring $2 million to different UN facilities in the Gaza Strip. Moving on to the West Bank, there was a suspected attempted Palestinian attack today. 2 Palestinians armed with knives were arrested at the entrance to the Eldad settlement in Gush Etzion. The 2 were arrested and taken for questioning. In addition to this, there was a settler attack that was reported in the Kfar Naim village near Ramallah. According to the reports, settlers from the Sdei Ephraim settlement raided the village, injuring 1 Palestinian as property was vandalized and livestock was attacked as well. Other news, the first Friday of Ramadan passed relatively calmly in the last 24 hours. An estimated 50,000 to 60,000 people attended prayers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and this includes several thousand from the West Bank as well. It's also noteworthy that according to the report, this is in fact the calmest Friday in the Old City in Jerusalem since the war began, and one of the calmest first Fridays of Ramadan in several years. Some of the reports about this noted that experts are saying that the reason that violence broke out on the first day of Ramadan earlier in the week is because police were actually trying to block people from entering the mosque, and that after the first day the police policy changed. In fact, the police now are standing behind gates at the entrance of the mosque, and since then there have been no incidents of violence reported. Regarding IDF activity, there were very few reports about IDF activity in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. However, El Qassam brigades did report that its fighters clashed with the IDF as the IDF was raiding the Farah refugee camp near Tubas. There was little information given about what actually happened there, and the IDF did not report about this raid. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were barrages of rockets and missiles fired by Hezbollah into the northern parts of Israel today. These targeted the areas of Shlomi, Zarit, Shtula. There were also rockets sent towards the areas of Shomra, Evin Menachem, Margaliot, and Malachia. Hezbollah took responsibility for over 8 border incidents and fire incidents in the last 24 hours. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes reportedly targeted Hezbollah military infrastructure in the Hula village and in the areas of Al-Mash'ab, as well as attacking lookout posts in Meruchin and in Ita Sha'ab. Hezbollah infrastructure was also targeted in the villages of Kila and Levona, and artillery fire was also reported in the Wadi Hamul region. In addition to this, Al-Ahbar reported that there was artillery fire targeting an empty house in the Hula village, and Al-Manar reported airstrikes in the areas of Ramia as well. Other news, amidst the escalations of the past week, Hezbollah put out memes and messages in Arabic and Hebrew today, threatening that if the IDF expands its operations, Hezbollah will expand its attacks as well. Related to this, Rami Abu Hamdan, who is a Hezbollah representative in the Lebanese parliament, also commented to Al-Arabi al-Jadid today, stating that Hezbollah will expand its circle of fire in the coming days in response to the attacks that Israel carried out in the areas of Baalbek and the Bekaa Valley earlier in the week. Other news related to the situation, Reuters reported today that the Lebanese Foreign Office sent a letter to the French embassy in Lebanon, expressing that the French proposal for diplomatic resolution between the sides that was presented last month is a positive step and a framework that the country would like to work with. This French proposal calls for Hezbollah to be pulled up 10 to 15 kilometers north of the border and a deployment of some 15,000 Lebanese soldiers along the border with Israel. The letter that was sent also references the complete implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. This calls for Hezbollah evacuation of the southern parts of Lebanon entirely and pulling north of the Litani River. It is very unlikely that that will actually happen. However, the fact that that was mentioned is somewhat of a show of strength of the Lebanese government vis-a-vis Hezbollah. Other news, it was published today that last month Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah met with the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds force, Ismail Qaani. According to the report, Nasrallah told Qaani that he does not want Iran to be dragged into a war with Israel or the United States, and that Hezbollah can handle the escalations itself. I will add in a moment of commentary that it is far more likely that this is being put out by Iran, as a statement saying why, if escalations do happen, Iran may not get involved in the war itself, but instead will support Hezbollah to fight the war from Lebanon. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the Houthis announced today that they have expanded their military operations against Israeli ships into the Indian Ocean, targeting Israeli ships or ships that have any connection to Israel in the region. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria warned ships to avoid the direction of the Cape of Good Hope, that is the longer passage around Africa that does not go through the Red Sea, stating that the Houthis have already carried out 3 attacks against Israeli and American ships in the Indian Ocean using nautical missiles and drones. In addition, a few hours before recording this, UK MTO reported of an explosion that occurred near a ship in the Red Sea. However, there are no details given as of yet. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours. After the quote-unquote political bombshell that was dropped yesterday by the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, in which he called for new elections in Israel and stated that Prime Minister Netanyahu stands alongside Hamas and Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas as those who are obstacles for peace in the region. Today, President Biden supported Schumer's words. He was asked about this speech, and he stated that Schumer gave a good speech and expressed a serious concern that many Americans have, adding that Schumer was in touch with the president's staff before giving his speech. Other news: following a U.S. presidential order issued last month, Israel delivered today to the United States a letter signed by Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, in which the country obligates itself to only use U.S. weaponry in accordance with international law and to not stop U.S. aid from entering Gaza. Other political news: the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, set a court date today for the case Nicaragua has filed against Germany. Nicaragua is suing Germany, stating that Germany is violating its commitment to avoid genocide by offering political, military, and diplomatic support for Israel, and by stopping UNRWA's funding. Nicaragua is asking that the court instruct Germany to stop all of its aid to Israel and restore its funding to UNRWA. The court dates that is set for this is April 8th and April 9th. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, the White House welcomed today the announcement that was made yesterday of Mohammed Mustafa as the new Palestinian Prime Minister, calling on the government to begin intensive reforms as soon as possible. The statement added that a revitalized Palestinian Authority is essential to bring results for the Palestinians and to stabilize the situation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This is part of the U.S. vision that the Palestinian Authority is going to assume some responsibility in the Gaza Strip as part of developing a plan towards a two-state solution. In turn, the four prominent Palestinian movements that are rivals of the Fatah movement, that is Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and the National Palestinian Initiative, all announced today their objection to the appointment of Mohammed Mustafa as the new Prime Minister. Mustafa was appointed yesterday, and this is supposed to be part of a new unity technocratic government to reunite the different Palestinian factions in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The statement of the organizations, however, states that the appointment is, quote, a hollow move that has no national consensus and will only deepen the divisions. The statement added that this appointment demonstrates how disconnected the Palestinian Authority is from reality on the ground, stating that the Palestinian people have the right to question the usefulness of replacing one biased partisan government with another of the same nature. In addition, they called upon Fatah to not cooperate with his appointment, and instead to work towards the establishment of a new government that will be agreed upon by all parties. So this raises serious doubts about the ability to develop this unity government between Palestinians if Hamas is already rejecting it. Other news related to the future of the Gaza Strip. In a meeting of the Israeli expanded cabinet today, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant leveled heavy criticism at the avoidance of discussing a concrete day-after plan in the Gaza Strip. He enumerated four choices, which he said are all bad. However, he ranked them from the worst to the least bad. The worst was continued Hamas rule. The second was IDF military occupation of the Strip, which he stated will be costly in the lives of soldiers and divert military resources away from the West Bank. The third was leaving the area in lawlessness and chaos, which he said will require Israel to deal with defending itself internationally from responsibility for the situation. And the fourth, the least bad option, is, I quote, create a governance of a different local body, and since it is not Hamas but comes from Gaza, it will every now and then have to look to Ramallah, i.e. to look to take orders from the West Bank, for guidance. Other ministers attacked him and said that he was trying to promote the reinstating of the Palestinian Authority. He in turn answered that the price for politicians avoiding the question is being paid by IDF soldiers, and that senior soldiers on the ground and senior officers are warning that every time the IDF evacuates an area, Hamas is taking it over since there is a vacuum that is created because the IDF is not instating any other force, adding, in this way the organization cannot be defeated. Other news related to the future. In his interview today, Prime Minister Netanyahu also referenced what he sees as the future vision for the Gaza Strip. He stated, and I quote, "We'll have to set up a post-Hamas Gaza, a system where Israel has overriding security responsibility to root out any resurgent terror, and at the same time try to create a civil administration that is not Hamas and not beholden to those who advocate the destruction of Israel and the use of terrorism. But first you have to have victory. You cannot win peace if you don't win the war." He added that complete victory means that the IDF can do in Gaza what it can do today in the West Bank. That means confront terror threats without entire divisions or battalions invading the area, but rather with small military incursions. What we're seeing is that again in Israel, we're having a resurgence of the question what is going to happen in the day after Hamas, so to speak. Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying that the IDF is not going to maintain the governing authority, but rather just the security authority. However, this is not being voiced by Netanyahu in government, and in turn, when Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant is voicing that some sort of local administration has to be put in place, there's a lot of resistance in this within Israel's government. If you enjoyed these reports, please do remember to subscribe, give them a like, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.